Alrighty, welcome everybody back to the channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football, and today we're continuing my draft coverage by talking about my top 10 quarterbacks in the 2024 NFL Draft. I'm really excited to dive into this. I have watched 14 different quarterbacks. I don't think I'm going to watch any more. I might watch one more just to fill out that, round 15 number for the draft board and whatnot, but most likely I'm finished watching quarterbacks. I'm going to be talking about my top 10 today. No honorable mentions, but if you want to hear my thoughts or read my thoughts more so on the other 4 quarterbacks I watched, there's a link in the description down below that'll take you to my link tree, and then in that link tree there's a link to my Substack. I've written articles about all of the different prospects I've watched so far, all of the different quarterbacks I've watched so far at the very least. So if you want to hear my thoughts on guys like Joe Milton or Sam Hartman, or, the other quarterbacks I watched, I can't remember the other 2 off the top of my head. Devin Leary's one of them from Kentucky. And then the 4th one is the Western Kentucky quarterback, who I cannot remember the name of off the top of my head. So shout out to those 4 quarterbacks. I did watch them. They didn't make my top 10, unfortunately. But without further ado, let's go ahead and see who did crack my top 10, starting out with number 10. Kicking us off here with my QB 10, we have Taulia Tagovailoa out of Maryland, obviously the younger brother of current Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. The 2 aren't dissimilar. I don't think that they're a perfect comp, which is why I don't have Tua as my comp for Taulia, which I will explain real quick how I do my comps. I don't do one-to-one player comps. I think that sets unrealistic expectations, and obviously no 2 players are exactly the same. So what I do is shades of. It's more who a player reminds me of, right? There might be subtle differences. There might be some differences, but at the end of the day, I watch this player, and when I watch them, I think, okay, this guy reminds me a lot of this other guy. That's kind of where I'm going with that. So taking a look at what Taulia brings to the table, he's somebody that works very, very well within structure. I know a lot of people don't like the term game manager. It comes off as derogatory. I get it. I don't believe it's an inherently derogatory statement or label, whatever you want to call it. And I think it applies to Taulia and his brother Tua pretty well. I think they're both wizards when it comes to, playing on time and in rhythm, being able to read the field, just taking what the defense gives them. Taulia is not quite as good as Tua, but you can definitely tell he has taken after his brother in that regard. Taulia is a quarterback that is more than capable of getting through his progressions, and he has a really good processing ability both pre and post snap, something that he's very confident in, and it shows on tape, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about his areas for improvement. But as a passer, he's definitely shown he's capable of throwing with anticipation. That's a big thing for me. If you can throw with anticipation, it's going to go a long way. Obviously, when you get to the NFL, you got to be able to throw guys open, and Taulia is definitely capable of doing that. Speaking of his ability to throw the football, he has a quick, snappy release. I'm definitely a fan of what I'm seeing in that regard. He throws with touch when he does throw downfield, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. But when it comes to throwing to other areas of the field, short accuracy is fantastic. He's very, very good in the quick game, just getting the ball out quickly to his first open read. And when it comes to throwing the ball over the middle of the field, there's flashes of accuracy and the ability to do so. Not necessarily consistent, but definitely something that he's been building upon, and I'd imagine he will continue to build upon. In terms of pocket presence and how he operates under pressure, I think he's pretty good at operating under pressure. He's not fantastic, but he definitely has an above average ability to sense when pressure's coming in. He's definitely shown that he's capable of climbing the pocket to deliver throws, which is fantastic to see. And he's not somebody that's going to shy away from getting hit when he's throwing. He's not somebody that he's going to pull the ball in and have to run away if he's about to get hit. He'll sit in the pocket and he'll take a hit. But what really stands out to me about Taulia, my favorite aspect of his game, is his play extension. He's really good at, getting outside of the pocket, resetting his feet, delivering throws on the run, things like that. Not so much off platform, but just being able to extend the play with his legs, both as a passer and as a runner. I mean, he's a legitimate threat when you get him out in open space. Now, you're not going to mistake him for Lamar Jackson or anything of that nature, but he's definitely capable. When we get into his weaknesses, very, very small frame, 5'10", 200 pounds, very Bryce Young-esque. Not ideal, obviously, but the biggest issue is his arm talent. Much like Tua, he struggles in this regard, but his arm is actually even worse than Tua's. I would say it's pretty much on the cusp of what's acceptable at the NFL level, and because of that, When he tries to throw the ball downfield, he will float passes quite often because he's trying to overcompensate for that lack of arm strength. And he can't generate a lot of velocity or zip behind his throws, which leads to some problems with his processing ability, because one thing he will do is he will see an open receiver or see a receiver breaking open or see a tight window he thinks he can fit the ball through. He'll attempt the throw, and he just can't put enough zip behind it to really complete that pass. So he'll get himself in some trouble in that regard. That's why his decision making is so low for me. Just a lot of passes where he thinks he can make it because he sees it, because he knows it's going to happen, excuse me. He just doesn't have the arm talent to do it. He's also not very good at throwing off platform. When he gets off platform, things get wonky. His accuracy is all over the place. And I don't love his footwork. His lower body mechanics could definitely use some work. He reminds me a lot of Stetson Bennett, who is another kind of older, skinny, game manager-esque quarterback. And I think Talia will be a similar type of quarterback in the NFL. I think he'll be a high caliber backup in a pretty complex type of offense. Obviously, Stetson Bennett backing up Matt Stafford in the McVay offense. I would honestly love to see Talia go back up his brother. I think he would be a great fit in Miami. I don't have fits for any of these guys. It's just something that came to mind. But I think Talia can definitely carve himself out a role as a solid backup at some point in his NFL career. Next up, my QB9, I have Michael Pratt out of Tulane, and I will say I had a lot more fun watching his tape than I expected. Not because he's some superstar quarterback or anything like that, but it was almost nostalgic. I started watching football in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and a lot of the quarterbacks of that era played like Michael Pratt. They were quarterbacks that really tried to beat you from the pocket, weren't super athletic, but could maybe get down and dirty if they had to. But they were just quarterbacks that wanted to hang in the pocket, make their reads, and deliver. And Michael Pratt was definitely that at Tulane. I don't know why I hesitated there. That's what he was at Tulane. So taking a look at his strengths, he's got a strong, sturdy frame, 6'2.5", 217 pounds. Wears it well. That's for sure. His arm strength, while not fantastic, is definitely above average. He's able to generate a little bit of velocity and has a little bit of zip behind his balls. Phrasing. But like I said, he wants to beat you from the pocket. That's the big thing for me. I like his pocket presence a lot. I would say it borders on elite by NFL prospect standards. And because of that, he handles pressure pretty well. He has shown that he's willing to either step up against pressure or step into it if he has to deliver a throw, which I like a lot. He's very tough in the pocket. In fact, I would say his overall competitive toughness is very Matthew Stafford-esque. Now, I don't think he plays like Stafford, but in terms of like being able to take a hit, not being afraid to take a hit, definitely gives me Stafford vibes. He has pretty good footwork. His footwork is pretty quick. It helps him navigate the pocket pretty well when he has to kind of move around, get jiggy when things are starting to break down. But he's somebody that when he does have to navigate, when he does have to move around, he's not going to try to throw the ball on the run very often. Pretty much what he's going to try to do is reset his feet and recalibrate as quickly as possible, which I admire. He works through his progressions in a pretty timely manner. He's not perfect, but he is definitely above average in that regard. He can manipulate defenders with his eyes pretty well. I've seen him look off safeties, look off linebackers, things of that nature. Always a plus when you've got a quarterback coming out of college, for sure. He's a steady decision maker. Now, we will talk about, he does have some lapses here and there, but for the most part, he is a pretty steady decision maker. I know I've been talking up his pocket ability, but he does have a little bit of mobility in there. He's a white boy that can kind of get jiggy with it from time to time, and that shows when he's, kind of forced to get out of the pocket. And what he's going to do is he's basically just going to pick up as many yards as he can and run out of bounds, or he's going to try to run through somebody, which I respect a lot. But don't expect him to make any guys miss in the open field, and I don't know how much that running ability would really, or how far it would take him in the NFL. It was there at Tulane, but when you get to the NFL where everybody's bigger, faster, and stronger, I don't know if that would be as much help. Taking a look at his ability to throw on the run, definitely good there. But some of his weaknesses, he doesn't really have any elite traits. Like I said, his pocket presence borders on elite, but outside of that, his arm, his accuracy, his processing ability, his athletic ability, his tools, his mechanics, none of those are elite traits. And nowadays, where everybody seems to be elite at something, it's not ideal to have a quarterback that doesn't have any real elite traits. I also don't like his release a whole lot. It feels pretty slow and labored. Definitely something that isn't ideal, which impacts his short accuracy quite a bit. In fact, his accuracy as a whole is pretty spotty, and I think it's primarily because of that release, I would imagine. He's trying to put it in places, and by the time he gets the ball out, guys are moved, they're, doing something else, defenders can close. It becomes an issue. And his ball placement is also an issue. Again, I would imagine that's primarily because of his release. I know I have his mechanics rated decently high. That's pretty much all lower body, and leading up to the throw. Like his mechanics before he throws the ball, I think are really fantastic, and his lower body mechanics are definitely great. But as soon as he cocks his arm back, he's ready to throw that thing. It kind of breaks down. As a play extender, not great. Obviously, with limited athletic ability, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot. Not the most creative quarterback either. And like I said, even though he is a pretty steady decision maker, there are like 2 to 3 plays a game where he's going to try something that's not open. He's going to fall in love with a read pre-snap, and he's going to try to force it in somewhere, and it just doesn't work. Another thing, something that really upset me when I was watching him that he struggles with is throws outside the numbers. Don't expect him to do a whole lot if you're running a comebacker or an out or a fade or a go ball or something. If it's outside the numbers, he's really, really going to struggle in terms of accuracy and placement. Pratt's interesting for me. I have a mid 4th round grade on him. I think he can be a good backup. I look at him, I saw somebody, I can't remember who for the life of me, say he is essentially the quintessential NFL backup, the most generic NFL backup you can imagine, and I agree. Which is why I have him comped to rookie Mac Jones, just because he has a little bit of like Mac Jones's moxie that he had back when he was a rookie. But at the end of the day, he's a system quarterback pocket passer that isn't going to amount to a whole lot. I think he'll be a solid backup, but if you're expecting Pratt to start or anything, I don't think you're going to get your bang for your buck. Next up, as my QB8, I have Jordan Travis out of Florida State. And this one sucks. I really wanted to have Travis higher. I loved watching him play. He's such a fun quarterback. But much like the player I have him comp to, Josh Dobbs, the consistency just isn't there. And I don't think he's a quarterback that can necessarily sustain being a starter. I think his career trajectory is probably going to be pretty similar to Dobbs's, in the sense that he's going to be a really solid backup and have some moments where he's going to come in and shock the world, but it's not going to amount to a whole lot. So taking a look at what he's good at, love his release. It's quick, it's snappy. He's great at getting the ball out in the short area of the field, behind the line of scrimmage. A lot of like the normal quick game stuff you'd expect from a game manager-esque quarterback. While his arm isn't fantastic, he definitely has enough strength to, generate some solid velocity in that short to intermediate area of the field. And also he has a decent bit of elasticity in his arm that helps him, be able to move his arm and throw the ball from different angles, which is always nice, always a nice bonus. In that short to intermediate area of the field, he's also pretty accurate. I have his medium accuracy as a C+, because once it starts to get a little depth to it, anything beyond like 7 yards, I would say things start to get a little spotty. But he's a quick game assassin, I think is the best way to put it. He's pretty mechanically sound as a passer. We'll talk about his footwork, but like his upper body mechanics are pretty good. I like his decision making for the most part. I know I have it at a C. I think it's about average. He's not going to do a lot of like boneheaded stuff, but there's definitely going to be some moments where you're like, ooh, Jordan, you're going to want to see him bring that one back. But I think, again, in the quick game, he makes good decisions. It's once you get beyond that like 7-8 yard mark, that's when things start to crumble for him. In terms of throwing off platform, I think he's pretty solid there. He's good at keeping his shoulders level, being able to, not sacrifice his mechanics when he's forced to throw off platform. But the best part of his game, by far, very much akin to Josh Dobbs, is what he can do when the play breaks down. This guy is incredible. I have an A- for his play extension. It's the only like elite trait I would say Jordan Travis has to his game. When the play breaks down, he does a fantastic job of keeping his eyes downfield, and not only keeping his eyes downfield, but being able to like navigate through the clutter and the mess, and just being able to find open guys downfield. It's almost like his field vision improves when things break down, which I think is pretty funny. But because of that field vision, when the play breaks down, during the play, it's a little bit different, or during the structure of the play, it's a little bit different. But when the play breaks down, does a great job of seeing downfield. And obviously he has some damn good athletic tools to pair with that. So he's somebody that, you don't only have to account for him throwing on the run, making big plays on the run, but also he can scramble. Like, he's a legitimate rushing threat. He has damn good speed, acceleration. He's really sharp when it comes to cutting corners and changing direction. His burst, I described in my prospect write-up as devastating, which I stand by, and he's got some pretty good lateral agility and twitch as well. So Jordan Travis is a really fun, kind of hectic quarterback, but when it comes to, brass tacks, and we're talking brass tacks here, his arm definitely limits his ability to throw the ball downfield. You're not going to see a lot of him, being able to chuck up go balls and things of that nature. He's really going to struggle there. And because of his limiting arm, he has to, much like the last two quarterbacks we talked about, he has to compensate for it. So he's going to put too much air behind passes. He's going to sail go balls, things of that nature. And while I do like his release for the most part, it's pretty inconsistent. I like, how do I want to word this? I think it's a pretty release when everything's going to plan, but there's moments where, he'll let the ball out at a weird angle, or, he'll try to get too cute with his arm angles, and that's going to cause lapses in his accuracy. I do think his mechanics as a whole are good, and he knows how to be a mechanically sound passer. It's just a matter of doing it consistently, which is why his mechanics aren't rated higher. He's pretty good at getting through his progressions for the most part, but when his first read isn't open, like I said, when you get beyond like 7 yards downfield, things become a little bit inconsistent for him when he's within the structure of the play. But once again, for some reason, when the play breaks down, he's, Mahomes navigating down the field. Maybe that's a little generous, but his anticipation and his pre-snap processor, they're just simply not up to snuff. He doesn't throw guys open very often. He's not somebody that's going to diagnose a bunch of mismatches pre-snap. It's pretty much, Jordan Travis is a quarterback that's pretty much just waiting for everything to go to shit so he can play the hero and make everything work somehow, which in college, fun, fine. In the NFL, you're going to be the pastronaut. But speaking of kind of waiting for things to break down in the pocket, he's very jittery, he's very anxious, he's always moving around, not great there. And obviously he's coming off a pretty significant injury and will be 24 at the start of his rookie year. So he's not somebody that you can really bring in as a developmental prospect. I'm not going to lie, I tweeted something out right after I started watching Travis. I was like, I like this kid. I think he can be pretty good. I did like a early rough QB rankings and had Travis as like a 2nd round prospect, not knowing his age. I was thinking he was real young, because I don't watch a lot of college football outside of scouting prospects. That's kind of my entire college football intake is during the spring scouting prospects. And someone responded and was like, you do know Jordan Travis is 24, right? And as you can see, that knocked down his draft grade quite a bit for me. But I like Travis. I think he'll be a fun backup at the NFL. We all fell in love with the pastronaut, and I think Jordan Travis can have a very similar trajectory. Moving on to my QB7, we've got Spencer Rattler out of South Carolina. And this is where we start to get into quarterbacks that I think could be genuine starters in the NFL. Not high-level starters necessarily, but a starter nonetheless. Rattler's an interesting case, though, because obviously he was on that Netflix show, and people weren't exactly too thrilled with what they saw of him on there. And, he's already 24. So there's a little bit of concern there. Or he's not 24 yet, excuse me. He will be 24 during his rookie season in September. So a little bit of concern there, not ideal. But looking at what he does, right, he's another quarterback with a really nice, quick, snappy release. I would say his is like lightning quick. His arm talent is near elite, which allows him to generate velocity with the flick of a wrist, which is awesome to watch. His release is very satisfying. He's able to layer that velocity with touch on throws downfield. He's a pretty good deep passer for that reason. He has a good understanding of leverage both pre and post snap. I would say at least at an above average level. Not quite elite, but definitely better than a lot of his peers. He's somebody that, when the time comes, he will check the ball down from time to time, which is always good to see out of a quarterback with a big arm, because, you're expecting them to want to just fire it downfield every play, and Rattler doesn't always do that. On top of that, he's an elite play extender, thanks to his short area agility and evasiveness. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate when he gets into the open field, and we'll talk about that, but in that short area, he's awesome in terms of mobility. So he's able to extend plays pretty well. He's incredibly smooth when he's asked to make off-platform throws, or when he's forced to, rather. Nobody's asking him to do that, I suppose. But he's another quarterback that, when the play breaks down, he's great at keeping his eyes downfield, readjusting, making his reads, and delivering. In terms of his ability in the pocket, not fantastic, but he's definitely willing to hang in there and take a hit if he has to, which is always a net positive. And while he's not elite in open space, he's definitely more than capable of picking up yards with his legs, most notably because of his toughness as a runner. When I was watching him on tape, I saw a couple moments where I was impressed by his contact balance, which obviously isn't normal for a quarterback. Normally, if you're running, you don't want their contact balance to have to come into play, but I was definitely impressed with his. With his frame, though, 6 foot 211, probably not ideal. But looking at some of his weaknesses, like I said, he's capable as an athlete in terms of, moving around an open field, but he lacks that like high-end speed, burst, agility, etc. In the open field. When the blitz comes in, he struggles a lot. He's another quarterback that gets really jittery and anxious back there. And those jitters will cause him to abandon his footwork and just attempt throws from all sorts of wonky stances. I'm talking fading backwards, off his left foot, off his right foot. I've seen a couple where he's throwing the ball and his feet aren't even in the air, or aren't even on the ground. Like, he gets weird with it. He gets weird with it for sure. His internal clock, his ability to kind of drop back, hit the top of his drop, let it rip, pretty inconsistent. I would say at best it would be described as inconsistent, for being totally honest. He's not great at sensing pressure from his backside, so when you have edge rushers kind of looping around, not going to do a great job of picking up on their presence. However, on the bright side, kind of silver lining, his footwork, which I would describe as undisciplined, as I said, kind of causes him to drift back too far in the pocket when he's making his drops, so at least it's somewhat rare that edge rushers or defensive linemen actually get to his backside. So maybe that's not going to be as big of a deal in the NFL. He tends to bail on clean pockets pretty early, which is always going to invite some unnecessary chaos. And when he's under pressure, he will chuck the ball downfield. Like I said, every once in a while he'll take his checkdowns, enough for me to take note of it, but he does like to just say, screw it, somebody's down there somewhere. And not always ideal when you're throwing off of wonky bases and wonky platforms and whatnot. But, Spencer Rattler, I see a lot of Baker Mayfield in him. More specifically like Carolina Baker Mayfield, where everything was kind of a mess and he was just kind of doing whatever he wanted. Because that was Spencer Rattler at South Carolina. He just kind of did whatever he wanted. And, it worked well enough for him, I suppose. But when you get into the NFL, you need to play in structure a little bit. And I think he's somebody that, like I said, he's going to be 24, but it's a late 24. It's a September birthday. So if you could get him somewhere with a really old veteran quarterback that could teach him a thing or two and, perhaps help him mature, I think that would be huge. I'd love to see him go to the Rams with Matthew Stafford. I think Matthew Stafford would do wonders for his development. You could put him wherever Kirk Cousins ends up. I think he's another quarterback that he can sit behind and kind of learn from. I'm trying to think. Seattle, backup Geno Smith, who had a similar career path coming out, ended up being a late bloomer. I think Rattler's somebody that might be a late bloomer. A place that has a disciplined veteran quarterback that's looking for his successor would be ideal for Rattler, because I do think if you play your cards right, you could end up with a very fun starter, but at the very least, you're going to get a pretty hectic backup, and Lord knows the NFL world loves those. All right, moving up to my QB6, we've got Michael Penix Jr. out of Washington, and this is the first quarterback that I'm fully confident can be a starter at the NFL level. However, how good of a starter? Time will tell. I know a lot of people were really big on Penix coming out have been really big on Penix coming out because of how successful Washington was. But when you look at that receiver room and you consider a lot of his play was just screw it, roams down there somewhere. And when you're throwing it up to the guy, it's less of a 50-50 ball and more of like an 85-15 ball. It starts to fall in line. It kind of starts to evaporate. His success starts to make a little bit more sense. But looking at what he does right, this is a guy with an absolute rocket launcher attached to his left shoulder blade. He has an absolute rocket of an arm. He has laser-like drive velocity that allows him to hit throws in tight windows and, you know, place the ball where only his receiver is going to be able to get it on the sideline. His quick release, shout out to Trevor Sikkema for this, his quick release is uncannily similar to a cowboy drawing his pistol. So if you're really pro 2A, Michael Penix might be the quarterback for you. We've got a rocket launcher, a laser, and a pistol, or a six-shooter, more specifically, all in that left arm of his. But he's able to take that velocity that he's able to generate with a super strong arm and kind of layer that with touch on downfield throws, which is definitely a net positive. When it comes to throwing the ball downfield, pinpoint accuracy. It's like he's got a homing device on that rocket launcher arm. So that's what Penix is going to be at his best at doing, is just attacking downfield. If you've got a 50-50 receiver, if you've got a big body receiver, Penix is going to take advantage of him. That's going to be his favorite target day one. Additionally, he's able to cook in the quick game with good accuracy in that short to intermediate area. Again, talking like, you know, behind the line of scrimmage up to like 7 yards. He's pretty accurate there. He's pretty okay over the middle of the field too, not fantastic. But when he does throw to that area of the field, he's pretty accurate. Off platform, we've seen some pretty solid play, specifically on bootlegs, but as a play extender, not great. And we'll talk about that. At all three levels, he sees the field pretty decently. I wouldn't call it a negative, but I also wouldn't call it a positive, hence the C rating. And he's more than willing to hang in the pocket and take a tough hit, mainly because he doesn't leave the pocket much, but when he is in the pocket, he's not afraid to get hit. He's really good pre-snap at diagnosing mismatches, primarily speed and size mismatches. If you've got a big or a fast receiver on the outside and he's up against a corner Penix doesn't think can handle it, he's going to pick up on that pretty quickly. And when it comes to running the ball, the rare instances when he does, his speed is above average. Great, no, but definitely above average. Looking at some of the downsides here, he's another guy that's going to be 24 during his rookie season, and he's had 2 surgeries on his right ACL, which is a major red flag. I know at the combine, his medicals came back pretty positive, which is fantastic. You know, definitely not rooting for this guy to be injury prone or anything like that. But they came back pretty positive, which is awesome. I'm hoping that's the case, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still at least a little concerned about it, because 2 ACL surgeries is nothing to just brush over. On top of that, his mechanics and footwork are incredibly wonky and become straight up unpredictable when the play starts to break down. In the pocket, his hips are as stiff as a board, so he's not going to do a whole lot of moving back there. I would say he's very reminiscent in the pocket of Hendon Hooker from Tennessee last year, in the sense that he did not move. They're both absolute statues. There's zero pocket presence or awareness from Penix. The only reason his pocket presence isn't at an F is because I like his ability to hang in the pocket and take big hits. But other than that, not a whole lot going on there. He's not somebody that's going to anticipate routes a whole lot. He's shown flashes of it, but he's pretty inconsistent there. He's also somebody that's addicted to hunting big plays, so he's constantly looking for an excuse to show off that big arm. And that's fine. I get it. But you know, when it comes at the cost of, you know, overlooking short to intermediate throws, which was sprinkled throughout Penix's tape, not ideal. He's also somebody that can become infatuated with reads pre-snap. Like I said, if he identifies a mismatch he likes with speed or size, he's going to become married to that. He's going to stare down that route. And even if the play is highly contested, he's going to pull the trigger. Now, he had Rome Odunze to bail him out quite often on those, but when you get to the next level, you're not guaranteed to have a Rome Odunze. Right? Say he goes somewhere like New York. They don't have a Rome Odunze. They don't have a guy that's going to bail him out on those 50-50 balls, so it's going to become an issue. And then as a runner, not a lot of creativity. There's just not a lot of creativity in his game as a whole. Not a lot of play extension. Like I said, he doesn't leave the pocket a whole lot. So giving him a comp was tough. But the thing I saw the most, again, when I do shades of it, doesn't have to be a one-to-one comparison. It's just, what do I see? I saw Tim Tebow throwing the football. Really wonky release. Great downfield passer. Lefty with an absolute cannon. Accuracy was okay, pretty spotty anticipation, pretty iffy decision making. Purely as a passer, he reminds me a lot of Tim Tebow. Now, Tebow is more athletic, could move more. Maybe I'm only married to this comp because lefty. Maybe what I should have done is Hendon Hooker, but it is what it is. I think Penix will be a fine starter at the NFL level. If you can put him somewhere with a good offensive line where you don't have to worry about him getting out of the pocket very often, and he has a good downfield threat, I think he can be productive at the very least. Getting into the top 5, we're talking about quarterbacks I think can be really good starters in the NFL. We've got J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. I love McCarthy. I had a lot of fun with his tape. I want to point out, first and foremost, I'm not one of those people that thinks he was Michigan merchant, run game merchant, whatever. I think he has upside of being a really good quarterback. However, I think he has a little bit of ways to go, so we'll go ahead and talk about that. Starting out with his strengths. Arm talent, awesome. High-level arm talent. He's able to get that ball downfield at a high clip. He has a lot of zip behind his throws. Throws real tight spiral. It's a real pretty ball, but he's able to use that zip and a quick, tight, compact release to fit throws into tight windows at a pretty solid clip. He's able to layer his velocity that he generates with that big arm with some touch to hit receivers in stride downfield. There's some flashes of high-level anticipation, not exactly consistent, but definitely he's shown that he's capable of doing it. You just want a little bit more consistency there. He also flashes the ability and, more importantly, the willingness to take shots over the middle of the field, which is big. As a Bears fan, I get scarred by quarterbacks who don't like to hit throws over the middle of the field, so that's a big thing for me. His accuracy is above average in the short to intermediate area of the field and then over the middle as well. I like his accuracy in that regard. His poise in the pocket improved quite a bit between 2022 and 2023. Still has some room to grow, and which is kind of the story of J.J. McCarthy. Still has some room to grow, but he's improving there. That's definitely inspiring. One of his best traits, though, is his ability to read and attack zones. He has a really good understanding of who's covering what, when guys are going to break open, when guys are going to be able to sit down and find an open space. Like, he's really, really good with that and understanding leverage and having spatial awareness. He's really good as a passer against zone coverages. Additionally, he has shown the ability to process speed and leverage mismatches downfield, something that will take you a long way in the NFL, if he can do that a little bit more consistently. When it comes to playing within structure, he's pretty good, especially when he can diagnose a mismatch pre-snap, which is something else I really like. His pre-snap processor is pretty damn sharp. He's shown the ability to not only extend plays, but also hit throws off platform, which is great. He's a sharp pocket passer with some good upside as an improviser as well. I really liked his situational awareness. If you watched Michigan last year, when they get into 3rd and long situations, which wasn't super often, but when they did, McCarthy did a great job of keeping his eyes downfield and extending plays when needed to make sure he could get the ball to the sticks. Doesn't throw short of the sticks very often on 3rd downs, if ever. And also because of his athletic ability, which, as you can see, A- I think is pretty damn good. He's a legitimate threat on designed quarterback runs such as read options due to his speed, flexibility, and explosiveness as a runner. And on top of all that, he possesses that ideal competitive toughness. For lack of better words, he's got the it factor. I mean, he really does. I think all the quarterbacks in the top 5 here to a certain extent do have that it factor. But when we're looking at some negatives here, McCarthy does have some moments of getting stuck on his first read. It'll happen. You want to see him improve in that regard. He will predetermine his reads before the snap pretty often. Pretty often is pushing it. More often than I'd like him to. Like I said, he identifies his pre-snap reads pretty quickly. He's pretty good at doing that, but he will, again, marry himself to those and kind of force throws in different situations. He's got some flashes of being able to snap his head through his progressions pretty quickly, but it's not consistent enough for my liking. And just as a whole, his post-snap ability to process the field needs work. It definitely needs work. His accuracy downfield, especially on go balls and fades, leaves quite a bit to be desired. I think he's just got to reel himself in. His field vision is good, but there are definitely lapses, especially when it comes to identifying linebackers. He had some trouble with linebackers kind of creeping up on him. Not so much in zone, but just over the middle, or I guess I guess it would be in zone. Linebackers kind of creeping up on him over the middle of the field. So he's good against zone, but those linebackers can be pesky. He also has a problem with drifting into pressure. But like I said, with that toughness he has, he's willing to take or make throws while getting hit. So it's not the end of the world. Definitely not something that's great, though. He's a quarterback that doesn't like to throw the ball away. He would much rather force a pass, which is tough for decision making for sure. And then obviously, like I said, I don't believe in it, but there's definitely going to be some concerns about how much of a role he had in Michigan's offense. I don't think it's a huge issue, but it is what it is. That being said, I like McCarthy a lot. Don't think he's a quarterback you want to start day one. I think he's more of a draft and stash type of player. I would like to see him go somewhere that, maybe has a veteran quarterback. I know Minnesota is going to be aggressive in trading up for a quarterback. If they keep Kirk and they're able to draft McCarthy to sit behind him, that would be like ideal. Or Atlanta, if they're able to land Kirk to draft McCarthy to sit behind him. Like, those would be ideal situations for him. I've got a player comp or shades of to Jim McMahon, which a lot of people might look at and be like, what are you talking about? They got that, like, I don't give a fuck attitude. They're good pocket passers with really underrated athletic tools that aren't afraid to get down and dirty, aren't afraid to run a guy over. Like I said, they just play with that fuck you attitude. And I think JJ McCarthy is what Jim McMahon could have been at his best, right? You want to talk, I guess this would be more like a low end comp for McCarthy, but I'm using it because McCarthy's at his low end. He has some development to do. If he were to develop on the track that I expect him to, you're looking at more of like Kirk Cousins with a little bit more swag and mobility, right? So I like the McMahon comp. I think it's a fun one, but I think McCarthy's going to be a fun quarterback in the NFL, and I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in the league. Moving into the top 4 now, we've got Jayden Daniels out of LSU, and I know I've already lost a couple of you. I know you see Jayden Daniels, who just won the Heisman, below somebody that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. You're thinking to yourself, what the hell? What is this guy talking about? Just hear me out, okay? First and foremost, I'm not ignorant enough to think that this might not be a little biased, primarily because I am a Bears fan and I just sat through Justin Fields, and I see so much of Jayden Daniels and Justin Fields that I'm a little bit scared for what he's going to be in the league. If I were to tier out my quarterbacks, I would say the top 2 guys are like surefire, probably going to be superstars in the NFL. The third guy would be in his own tier as like going to be a plus level starter, but probably never elite. And then Daniels and McCarthy are 2 quarterbacks that I view as a little bit developmental, but with super high upside. I think Jayden Daniels can be a legitimate game wrecker, but I think he has a lot of growth to do, or a lot of room to grow, a lot of improving to do. And after seeing what just happened to Justin Fields, I think he's somebody that is borderline fit dependent. Like, I think if Jayden Daniels ends up somewhere like Justin Fields just had, where he has a limited supporting cast and, the coaching staff isn't exactly fantastic and the offensive staff isn't great, he's going to be in trouble. And he doesn't have the added benefit that Fields does of, coming in at 21 and being 24 going into year 4. He's 24 going into year 1. So I'm a little hesitant, right? That being said, Daniels is going to be a fun quarterback. He's going to be super awesome. He's a truly absurd athlete. He runs around. He's a powder keg. He's a powder keg that is always ready to explode with a dynamic play. He has a rare combination of speed, agility, bend, evasiveness, and twitch. He has a quick, compact release that allows him to flick the ball effortlessly. His arm, while not quite elite, is above average, and he's able to generate a little bit of velocity. He's able to layer that velocity with touch on vertical routes and slot fades in particular. Those are his money plays, I would say. He does a pretty good job of keying in on speed mismatches pre-snap and is able to attack the field accordingly. There's flashes of anticipation sprinkled throughout his tape. Not consistent, but definitely a little something there. Maybe you can grow with. There's moments of him being able to move single high safeties and coverage. If he sees cover 1, for example, he's got a post coming over the middle of the field. he's shown the ability to move that safety, be able to attack behind him. Not consistently, but he's been able to do it for sure. He's mostly efficient on passes over the middle of the field. I know people have been kind of memeing his like low attempt rate, and he didn't attempt a lot, but when he does, he's solidly efficient. I'd like to see him attack the middle of the field more, which is another thing that scares me. Something that Justin Fields really struggled with. If you're a Bears fan, you know he can't throw slants, he can't throw backside digs. Jayden Daniels isn't far off from that. When it comes to playing in the pocket, he had some pretty solid poise mixed with the ability to climb the pocket, at least in his senior season, or his final senior season. And when it comes to pressure barreling in on him, he's able to hang in the pocket and take a hit. But looking at some of his weaknesses here, his lack of overall consistency is jarring. His only great year was his final year. Granted, he won the Heisman. That's as great as it gets. But when you go back and you look at his tape in 2022 and before that and all the way back to ASU, it's like, yikes. And even his final season at LSU, there's a lot of like, ooh, that reminds me of ASU Jayden. That's a 2022 Jayden play. It's not great. His arm strength, like I said, isn't elite. I know a lot of people, there's this big misconception that he's this big armed quarterback. He's not. He's accurate downfield, but his arm isn't that big. And because it isn't that big, it limits the amount of velocity and zip he can put behind his throws, and it results in some overcompensation on his downfield throws, but not enough. Like, Daniels is so accurate that when he's not overcompensating, that he would have like A+ deep accuracy, but that little bit of overcompensation knocks him for me. He also has a tendency to be a big play hunter, leaving a lot of open opportunities, leaving some meat on the bone in the short to intermediate areas of the field, which you just can't do in the NFL. He doesn't keep his eyes downfield when he's scrambling. When he's going to run, he's going to run. There's no like, I'm going to pull back at the last second and throw it, nothing like that, which when you're as big of a big play threat as he is on the ground, I get it to a certain extent, but you got to be able to adjust and throw when the play breaks down. You can't just scramble every time, right? He also struggles to hit throws outside the numbers, notably on curls and comebacks, which is a little concerning for me. He had a high pressure to sack rate, very reminiscent of Justin Fields. In 2022, it was at 30.8%. And then at 2023, it improved, but still not great at 20.2%. Probably the biggest similarity he shares with Fields is he does hold the ball too long and would rather take a sack than just throwing the ball away. He's good at identifying mismatches pre-snap, but when the coverage adjusts after the snap, so say a team showing cover 2 and then they switch to like a cover 3, cover 4, he panics. He is not great at handling that. And then we've all seen the clips. When it comes to him running the ball, he's like a Looney Tunes character. He really does not care about the hits he's taking, which he has a big frame. He's not Justin Fields, he's not Cam Newton, he's not Josh Allen, though. He doesn't have a massive frame that's able to take that kind of wear and tear. And when you get to the NFL level, if you're taking hits like that consistently, it's going to be a problem. Now, I don't think, he's always going to be like that. I think that's something that'll just come with maturity. I think he'll have his, hey, rookie, welcome to the NFL moment. It'll be like, okay, maybe I shouldn't take big hits like that anymore. But, it's still concerning. That being said, if Daniels ends up in the right spot, somewhere with a great offensive coordinator, somewhere where he can really grow and develop, I would love for him to end up in New York. He's going to be a star. It's just a matter of his landing spot. Like if he were to go to Washington, like a lot of people are thinking, not super confident. If he were to go to New England, my expectations would be limited, to say the very least. But he slips to the Giants, to the Broncos, somewhere like that. I'm like, oh, please, Lord. It's over for the rest of the league. So Daniels, he's going to be a very volatile prospect in my opinion, but I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do, because at the very least, his floor is going to be pretty decently high because of that rushing ability, much like Justin Fields. Getting into the top 3, I have Bo Nix out of Oregon as my QB3. And again, I know that's going to turn a lot of people off, but as I was talking about with Jayden Daniels, if I were to tier these quarterbacks out, I do think Bo Nix has the ability to be an impactful starter day 1. And while I don't think he has the upside of like an elite quarterback, I do think he can be a pretty quality starter for a good while in the NFL. Kind of looking through what he does best, He's got plenty of experience, and the reason I bring that up with him and not some of the other older quarterbacks is because it shows on tape. I mean, he is a savvy veteran signal caller. One of the best things about his tape, one of the things that I enjoyed the most that really caught me off guard and was a pleasant surprise, he had a lot of control in Oregon's offense. Normally, when you have a college quarterback, you don't see them getting to adjust the play at the line of scrimmage, getting to hot route, getting to audible, and Nix was doing that pretty consistently. So for him to have that go ahead is incredible. He is one of the better pre-snap processors I've seen at the college level as I've evaluated quarterbacks. I always have to put an asterisk with that because I've only been doing this for a few years, but the few years I have been watching this, he is probably the best when it comes to processing the defense pre-snap. He works within the structure at a pretty high level. He's a true game manager. Obviously, I've got rookie Brock Purdy as my comp, and we'll talk about that here in a couple minutes, but he's a really good game manager. He's a savvy ball handler, rarely puts the ball in harm's way. We'll talk about the decision-making, why it's a little bit low here in a few minutes, but I promise it's not for him putting the ball in harm's way and throwing a lot of turnovers or anything like that. He generates velocity with a quick, fluid release. He's another guy whose arm isn't quite elite, which is holding him back from being like a quarterback with high upside, but it's an NFL talent, or it's an NFL caliber arm, excuse me. He also has that arm elasticity, which allows him to release the ball at different angles while maintaining his velocity. He's shown he's more than capable of throwing with touch at different levels of the field. He's pretty quick to identify mismatches based on speed, both like within the play and, over the course of a game. He's pretty quick to pick up on, where his receivers are quicker than the DBs on the other team, and he's not afraid to test those mismatches. There's flashes of anticipation on tape, not perfect, but definitely enough that you can feel confident that he'll grow in that area. He's a pretty good creator when the play starts to break down. He's an underrated athlete, I would say. At Auburn, he was kind of a loose cannon, and there's still a little bit of that to his game. It's almost like he's a loose cannon that's learned a little bit of discipline. Or he's one of those seasoned cops that had a wild side when he was coming out of the academy. That's kind of how I look at Bo Nix. He navigates the pocket pretty well when he's faced with pressure, all things considered. And he's more than capable of taking off and picking up that first down himself. But if the play breaks down, his first instinct isn't to run the ball, it's to keep his eyes downfield, make a play with his arm, which, as I've already said, I'm a big fan of. Now, looking at some of the negatives here, he's 24, less than ideal. It's gone for a lot of these quarterbacks. That COVID year really set a lot of these quarterbacks back. 30% of his passing attempts in 2023 came behind the line of scrimmage, according to PFF, which, yikes. He's really good at operating in the short to intermediate area, though. That quick game is going to be elite, at least you know that. And like I said, his arm, not quite elite. His accuracy isn't an issue, but he's another quarterback that when it comes to throwing the ball downfield, there are going to be moments where he tries to overcompensate for his lack of arm strength and ends up sailing a ball over a receiver's head. Not as much as some of the other guys, but definitely still present there. He's another guy that'll tend to drift a little too deep in the pocket. He doesn't handle pressure fantastically. He's pretty good, but not fantastic, and when he does kind of have issues with pressure, he'll short arm throws, which better than taking a sack, but they're throws he should be making. He hesitates to trigger on tight windows. Despite diagnosing him, you'll see moments on his tape where he, moves his arm a little bit. He's like, maybe I don't want to hit that, even though he can absolutely hit it. He's not immune to locking on that first read. Won't happen a ton, but it's definitely there. He can hold on to the ball a little too long at times, and he needs to work on throwing his receivers open. Now, I know I said he's good at throwing with anticipation. Basically what that is Nix is really good at anticipating routes breaking open, but he's not great at placing the ball in a way that only the receiver is going to be able to get to it, or that forces the receiver to come back to the ball so he can get away from a defender, if that makes sense. The decision making, the reason I have that a little bit lower, despite saying he's a pretty savvy ball handler that doesn't put the ball in harm's way, he'll just miss throws sometimes. He's going to try throws that he can't hit. Rarely do they result in turnovers. Rarely do they result in him, putting it in range for a defender. Most of the time, it's just misses. which isn't ideal. But all that being said, the reason I have his comp as rookie Brock Purdy really comes down to his lower body. He's, like I said, he's a great game manager. He has a good processor, pre-snap especially, and his pocket presence is pretty all right. But the problem is when the play starts to break down, his footwork and his lower body mechanics all over the place. They are a mess. And if you watched me talk about Purdy last year, that was my big gripe with Purdy. I hated his lower body mechanics, and it resulted in some issues for him. Now, Purdy this year improved tremendously. So I would like to see Nix go somewhere with a savvy OC or a savvy offensive mind that can, clean that up like Shanahan did with Purdy and really turned him into a top 15 quarterback. And I think Nix has that upside as well. I don't think he's as good as Purdy. I think Purdy's arm's a little bit better. I think he's more accurate, things like that. But I do think Nix can be that type of quarterback. So I like Nix. I think he can be a good quarterback. I would love to see him end up in Denver with Sean Payton. That's kind of my ideal fit, for him. I know that's not original or anything. I've seen a lot of people talk about him going to Denver, but I think if he falls that far, that would be an absolute home run pickup for the Broncos. So I like Nix. I like him more than a lot of people seem to. And I think he's going to be a sneakily fun quarterback to watch at the next level. All right, and here is where things really start to get fun. These top two quarterbacks are neck and neck for me. Honestly, the way I look at it, I think it comes down to preference, and we'll talk about what that preference is in a moment. But I genuinely couldn't put one as one as two. They're QB 1A, 1B. Call it a cop-out. I don't care. They're incredible. I think pretty confidently they're both going to be franchise NFL quarterbacks. So starting with Caleb Williams, who is, again, just as good as Drake Maye. I just like Drake Maye's game a little bit better, and we'll talk about why that is. But Caleb Williams is absolutely incredible. We're talking about a guy that the moment he steps on an NFL field, top 10 strongest arm in the league, easily. He can generate a shit ton of velocity with that strong arm, and he's able to layer that velocity with touch. His release is quick, it's snappy, it seems almost effortless, it's downright beautiful. His arm elasticity is off the charts. He's able to throw the ball from all sorts of different angles. He works through his progressions pretty quickly. He can fit passes into tight windows over the middle of the field when asked to. When it comes to moving in the pocket, he glides. I mean, it's effortless the way he navigates pressure. He navigates pressure well, both in and out of structure. I have in my scouting report, he's prime Chris Paul when it comes to playmaking, and I stand by that. One of the better playmakers I've seen at the quarterback position. He very rarely bails from a clean pocket, but on the flip side at USC, he also rarely had a clean pocket. He's a true magician when the play breaks down, and he's forced to improvise. He works wonders when he's off platform. He possesses the necessary hip torque to generate velocity in those situations. So when he's upright, when he's off platform, he's got a lot of velocity behind those balls. He has an incredible understanding of space as a runner. He's truly fierce and fearless as a competitor, doesn't shy away from a challenge. I know there's a lot of bullshit out there about him being soft, him being a baby, whatever. Throw it all away. If you think that about Caleb Williams, I am begging you, find a job. If you feel that way about Caleb Williams, I know you're someone that doesn't have a lot going on in life. Just find a hobby, do something, because Caleb Williams gets way too much shit, and I can make a whole video on that by itself. But we're just talking about his play. Although I will say, from everything I've seen, and I do mean everything, A+ character and a great leader, and that's shown by how his teammates talk about him. So if you're one of those people that thinks Caleb Williams is a diva, you're sorely mistaken. His teammates will tell you otherwise. When it comes to his weaknesses, and I don't deem these as weaknesses, they are more areas for improvement because Caleb Williams is constantly improving, as with Drake Maye, and we'll talk about him. There are lapses in his situational awareness, specifically on like third and short, he will chuck the ball downfield. So definitely want to fix that, be a little more, not conservative, but just smart with the ball in those situations. His footwork can become undisciplined at times, specifically when he's on the run. His feet can get crossed, things like that. Not the worst thing in the world, but definitely an area he can improve. He does tend to drift too deep in the pocket at times, but again, with how bad his offensive line was, I want to see how he operates behind a real offensive line before I really call that like a major red flag with him. Given the fact that he has this incredible arm, he's not immune to thinking, he can hit throws that he can't. And that's not like he doesn't have it in his arsenal. It's just, a throw might be a little tighter than he thinks. A window might be tighter than he thinks. The defender might be a little closer. So he's not immune to that arm arrogance that I've talked about. He does have moments where he will identify and lock onto his second or third read and hesitate to pull the trigger. And I think a lot of that is just him not trusting his receivers. Brendan Rice, for example, not fantastic. Day 3 pick probably at best. So Caleb didn't have the best weapons in college, and I think a lot of the hesitation in that is from that. I'm also slightly concerned that he may have developed some of those unruly hero ball habits playing behind a truly horrendous offensive line. Again, a lot of my questions with Caleb Williams, if you even want to call them questions, can be put to bed pretty quickly if he starts performing behind a competent offensive line. Another example of that is his time to throw. He had a pretty high time to throw. So if that doesn't improve when he's playing behind an offensive line that's not comprised of toddlers and car salesmen, then, maybe there's an issue there. But as a whole, Caleb Williams is going to be a superstar. He's probably going to the Bears #1 overall. I couldn't be more excited. I will buy his jersey very quickly if that's the case. I think he's an absolutely incredible quarterback. I just prefer Drake Maye slightly more. And finally, as I had mentioned when I was talking about Caleb Williams, Drake Maye is my QB1A for this draft class. I will say, there are moments where I kind of go back and forth between the two, but I think I'm going to settle on Maye as my QB1. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Starting out, strengths: tall, prototypical build, 6'4", 223 pounds. Love to see that. He has an elite arm. Not quite the top 10 as soon as he steps in the league like Caleb, but not far off. Every throw on the field is within his range. He can hit every single throw. His arm really shows in the short to intermediate areas of the field with how he's able to generate velocity. He's able to put a lot of zip behind his ball. He possesses probably the prettiest release I've ever seen. He's a quarterback, much like the guy I'm comp to, Justin Herbert, who just, when he throws the football, it's so aesthetically pleasing. I absolutely love it. I love his field vision. I think he sees the field incredibly well. He moves through his progressions pretty quickly, rarely gets hung up on his first read. His eyes are really good at manipulating defenders in coverage, whether it's a safety, linebacker, corner, whoever. He's very good at looking guys off, moving them with his eyes. He's great at reading the defense and identifying weaknesses pre-snap. His pre-snap processor is great. He understands leverage, both pre and post-snap, at a pretty high level for a college quarterback. His anticipation's pretty good. He throws his receivers open at a pretty high clip. He's incredibly accurate over the middle of the field. Not quite perfect, but pretty damn good. He drives throws outside the numbers with ease, with that quick, sharp, just beautiful release. He's a quarterback that works incredibly well in and outside of structure. I know there was this weird misnomer early on in draft season where it was like Caleb is the wild card and Drake's the perfect pocket passer. Drake's definitely better in the pocket, and Caleb's definitely better when the play breaks down. But I think it would be a misjudgment to label Drake as a pure pocket passer. He can be when he needs to be, but he's a lot more like these guys like Justin Herbert or Aaron Rodgers or whoever, right? Maye and Caleb are both in that regard, but I like Maye a little bit more in the pocket. I like Caleb a little bit more on the move. That being said, though, back to just talking about Drake here. I've talked about Drake during Caleb's part, and I've talked about Caleb during Drake's part. It's very fitting. They're very, very much married at the top of the board here. But looking at Drake here, quick feet allow him to stabilize his base in an instant. He's great at resetting his feet when he's on the move. He has fluid hip torque that sets up incredible off-platform throws. No fear when it comes to taking hits, whether it's while he's delivering a throw in the pocket or when he's running an open field. He has that Josh Allen fuck you type of energy to him. Unfortunately, he also has a little bit of the Josh Allen bozo gene, but that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about that in a moment. And I think he is an absolutely underrated athlete who possesses incredible twitch, burst, evasiveness, and balance when it comes to running in the open field. Now, he's not perfect. No quarterback prospect is. So taking a look at some of the areas he can improve, he does have moments of gun shyness. When I was going into my Drake Maye evaluation, I was under the impression that he was a gunslinger. You know, I heard a lot of gunslinger comps with him. I think the opposite. I think he has an incredible arm, but there are moments where he's like, maybe not. And much like Caleb, I do wonder how much of that is him just not trusting his receivers, because his two best receivers, from what I could tell, were Devontae Walker, who has dropped significantly in draft discussions, and his tight end Nesbitt, who isn't coming out this year. I am intrigued by him for next year, but all in all, Drake's weapons were not fantastic. You know, a lot of people like to talk about Caleb's lack of help. Drake was just as bad. I know Caleb's gets talked about more because they had higher expectations at USC, but UNC wasn't doing too great either. They had a good run game, but that was kind of it. His footwork isn't perfect. It's much improved from his sophomore year, but there still needs to be a little bit of tweaking done there, and I think he can definitely do that. He doesn't throw with a lot of touch downfield. I think that's somewhere he can improve. I think he will improve, but again, that is somewhere that he could improve. Much like Caleb, when he's on the run, there are times where he's going to cross his feet. Don't love that, but hopefully we can get that sorted out. And then, of course, like I said, that Josh Allen bozo gene is unfortunately there. You know, especially when Drake's under heavy fire. Sometimes he's just trying to get that ball out. Like there was a throw against Duke in particular where he was pinned on his own 1 yard line under pressure, and he just kind of chucked it up and sailed it right to a Duke defender. Not ideal, but he's young. He's a junior. That type of stuff gets better with age. Either way, I think Drake will either grow out of it or he'll be a player like Josh Allen where he throws so many touchdowns and he's so productive that every once in a while those bozo interceptions, it's like, oh, you silly little goose, you goofy little guy. But yeah, as a whole, I think Drake and Caleb both are going to be absolutely incredible in this league. I think this is a rare example of a draft class where we have two quarterbacks that can be top 5 talents, and I'm incredibly confident in both of them. Now, obviously, situation and fit matters a lot. So whichever one of these quarterbacks goes to Chicago is going to be in the best situation. Chicago is one of the best situations a quarterback has had to go into, a rookie quarterback, a first overall pick quarterback has had to go into ever. Whichever one goes to Washington or New England, interesting conversations to be had there. I'll reserve judgment. I'm not a big Dan Quinn fan, and Gerard Mayo could shock the world. He could very much be D'Amico Ryans and come out and have a wonderful program there, but a program like they're transferring colleges. A wonderful environment there, we'll put it. But I will say one thing for sure. I want to end off my Drake Maye spiel with this. If you're one of those people who sees Mitch Trubisky when you're watching Drake Maye, or if you're a certain former NFL quarterback that thinks he's Mason Rudolph but less accurate, no. Just no. I'm not even going to dignify that with an insult. Just no. You know better than that. You're making that shit up for attention. And this weird downward trajectory the opinion of Drake Maye is on right now, I don't know where that's coming from, but stop. The kid's awesome. You can say he's QB too. You can put him firmly behind Caleb, and I'll see it. I'll understand it. But if you have him any lower than 2, or if you have Caleb any lower than 2, I'm going to call into question your quarterback evaluation ability, because these two are incredible. And I'm really excited to see what they're going to do in the NFL. But anyways, folks, those are my top 10 quarterbacks in the 2024 NFL Draft. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to leave a like down below, as it helps out the channel a ton. Shows your support, shows you care. I really appreciate it. I promise it actually does make a difference. I know watching from the outside, it doesn't seem like those likes make a difference, but it does. Gives you a little dopamine rush when you see that number go up, because numbers are great. And if you didn't agree with anything I had to say, you think I had a quarterback too low, too high, left somebody off you think should be in the top 10, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these prospects just as much as I, wanted to put my thoughts out there, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing this for. I'm trying to start conversations, trying to start discussions, trying to start dialogue. So Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on this quarterback class. I think it's a really fun class. I'm really excited to see what a lot of these kids are going to do when they get to the NFL. But with all that out of the way, please make sure to subscribe down below. You won't want to miss out on my other NFL content coming out over the next couple months and into the future. I'll be talking about these players once they hit the league and are actually out there playing on Sundays. But all that being said, I hope you all enjoyed. And to everyone out there watching, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.
Had a chance on the throwback.
This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that